Our first speaker today is Elizabeth Schuh, and she will be presenting autonomous futures beyond on to 2050. She will talk to us about how regional transportation and development are impacted by changes in demographics, consumer preferences, and new technologies like autonomous vehicles. And looking to the future, what strategies can be pursued to promote viability, mobility, and competitiveness. Elizabeth is the Principal Policy Analyst at Chicago Metropolitan Agency, or CMAP for short. She leads development of regional scale analyses and recommendations on development, equity, tax policy, and transportation. Elizabeth led development of On to 2050, the Chicago region's recent comprehensive plan. She has worked at many scales, from neighborhood organizing to local planning and fiscal issues to regional policy. Her work addresses the complex interactions of infrastructure, development, and people to identify sustainability and equitable solutions. Everyone, please welcome Elizabeth Schuh.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. Thank you for showing up early on a Friday morning. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about autonomous vehicles and what they might look like in the future. So before I dive into that, I do want to take a moment just to tell you about what CMAP is. Many people are not familiar with it. We are the region's metropolitan planning agency. That's a very official name for the region's transportation planning agency. We take that role very comprehensively. So we address issues of transportation, land use, the economy, the environment, governance, and similar. We think that in order to effectively plan for the region's transportation system, we really need to address all the major issues that it interacts with. The map that you see on the screen here is the 7-county area that we cover. That is 284 municipalities, we do work with all of them, and 8.5 million residents. One thing that I want to emphasize, because today is about the Megaregion, is that we do think about this region, the Chicago region, and the idea that it extends beyond the state layer. Our borders stop there, but we keep going. So we coordinate with our counterparts, the city of Wisconsin, Indiana, and the Territory of Michigan on the issues that we address. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about today comes from the On to 2050 plan. If you haven't seen it already, there is the executive summary here. The full plan is actually available on the website. You can get the entire version printed. I wouldn't recommend it. It's built for the web. There's quite a lot of interactives, so you can go to the website. I'll have a link at the end and see more about all of these issues. The plan covers 5 topic areas. We talked about those a little bit earlier, but it's also guided by 3 overarching principles, and those are important as we talk about autonomous vehicles. So the first principle is inclusive growth. If you've lived here very long or you've heard much about Chicago, you might have heard that we're not growing as a region. We've actually lost small amounts of population in recent years. We take a look at this. We're losing low-and income residents, we're losing Black residents, and we're losing residents from all parts of the region. It's not a massive wave. We have 8.5 million people. We're losing maybe 10 or 20,000 people a year. So the region is not emptying out as we speak. But we wanted to learn why. And when we looked at other regions that were more economically successful, they simply did a better job of addressing issues like economic and racial segregation and giving an economic opportunity to all residents. So the plan emphasizes the need for growth. When we talk about resilience, we do include resilience to climate change, but this is also very key to just resilience to change overall. So we talk about changing technology, changing demographics, and changing mobility. And then finally, prioritized investment. We have limited dollars, so when we invest in the transportation system, when we invest in development, local space preservation, and many things that we do, we need to do that in a prioritized way. So I wanted to start a little bit before I talk about autonomous vehicles, about how the way that we get around is changing, and why that's important for what the future might look like. So So first and foremost, one of the things that we've seen, and this chart starts at 1980, but if we had data for the same geography going all the way back, you would see the same kind of thing that you're seeing starting in the 50s, which is a march towards getting to work in your car driving by yourself. That's the blue bar on the right-hand side. This is 2000. This is some kind of quick looks at American Community Survey data in the interim. I looked at the most recent data just 2 days ago. We see the same thing, which is that since 2000, we've really stopped adding the number of people who are getting to work, the proportion of people who are getting to work by driving alone. We started to mix up this side of the equation. So carpooling is going down, but what's going up is work from home, biking, and walking, and also taking rail. And so people are getting around in different ways, and often they might get around in all of these ways in one day. So we have a growing preference for multimodal options. People might want to take the train in, take a divvy or a scooter around town, and then take an Uber or Lyft home. And that's different than the type of transportation system that we've necessarily built for. This graphic shows a few different looks at what's going on right now today. The top is Divvy Bike Share. It opened in 2014. This is rides per month since it started. You see it kind of reaching a norm in about year 3, between 500,000 and 600,000 trips in the 4 months, and a lot fewer in February. Yeah. On the bottom, we have transportation network companies. That's kind of the official term for Uber, Lyft, and similar. And this is rides per day. Now, rides per day, clearly, transportation network company trips are many times the big bike share trips. But rides per day, starting with Monday over here on the left, what's always been interesting about this chart is I feel like we're all a little bit more organized during the week. On Monday, and trips go up throughout the week, kind of peaking on Saturday. So we're seeing increased use of TNCs in the region and nationwide. This is something that didn't really exist 10 years ago. So you have full-time mobile options, and I've talked about what those are. For all of these, transit is an essential part of that system. So Uber and Lyft, for example, you meet with them, they'll tell you that they need good transit to be successful because people want to have options. They want to have a trip that is the best time and cost for them at a given moment in time. And then finally, another thing that we're moving towards is a single user interface. So we have apps like Transit, Google trying to do this, where it's putting all of these individual services together. You as a consumer don't have to think about it, you don't have to download 5 apps. Another big shift, and this could actually be very interesting for autonomous vehicles, is the idea that we're ordering a lot of our goods online. Back in 2000, it was 1% or so. Today, we're above 10%. So right now, I do want to remind everyone, 90% of what we buy, we're still buying in person. Some things go and will. People want to sit on a couch before they buy it. They'd like to pick out your own apples. There are some things that will probably continue, but a lot of our goods are getting to us in a very different way, not from a retail store, and that we think will continue to grow for some time. This isn't about mobility per se, but this is something that will affect mobility quite strongly. So on the left, you see population in 2015 in the region broken out by age groups, youngest on the bottom, highest on the top, and you see that again, or oldest on the top, and then you see that again in 2050. The colors mark generations. Green is Z and later, just because later generations haven't really been divided in name. The thing to pay attention to here, though, is the top of this chart. We see residents over the age of 70 doubling in the region by 2050. Residents over the age of 80 go up even more. And so this means that we're going to need to plan for different types of transit services, different types of mobility, particularly for people who want to age in place, age in their community. And again, connected on autonomous vehicles could play a big role here. And so one of the last things I want to cover is that where we want to live is changing. So from 2000 to 2015, which is this bar here, we had what we see as typical pattern. This is where development is happening in the region, and particularly in areas that are already developed in some form or fashion. Blue is residential, the orange is non-residential. What's under construction or approved for 2016 to 2025 is moving that up. We're seeing an increasing proportion of people wanting to live, particularly in areas with strong transit access, or in areas that are employment centers. Those aren't necessarily all the same thing, but that's where we see a lot of this development going. That's a shift from what we used to have, which is continued expansion of the urban edge. So, connecting autonomous vehicles, as I said, and affect and change all of these shifts. I'm trying to hit a little bit on that as I talked about them, but we'll cover each of these more later. So, what are connected and automated vehicles? I think a lot of people kind of think about maybe a future that looks like this when you connect automated vehicles. You have some people in shuttles. This is kind of transit service. You have some people in their own vehicle, kind of going where they are. You also have a future that has a lot of multimodal options. This drawing actually happens to have set aside just for transit as well, and freight deliveries. So, this is one potential option of what the future might look like, what connected and automated vehicles might look like. But depending on what we do and what choices we make, it might look a lot like today. It's just that, you're in your car, you're reading, you're taking a nap, something like that, and you have more you extend what are typical expressways today, you have typical congestion, it just goes on for more miles. So I'm going to talk about how we might get to one or the other of these scenarios. When we talk about automated vehicles, I think it's important to recognize where we are, and then you're already driving vehicles that have some automation. So level 1, if you have cruise control, you have analog braking, or something like that, you're there today. Level 2, those systems start to work together. So if you have lane monitoring and cruise control, they're coordinated, and they're warning you together, changing the behavior of the vehicle together. You still have to have your hands mostly on the wheel. You might have driven these. If you've driven a more recent rental car, it'll actually yell at you if you take your hands off the wheel. Level 3, that's kind of where Tesla is right now. So it has a lot of the technology. It can actually drive independently of a person in a very simple use case. So if you're on a pretty open expressway, or if you're in an area that already has a lot of ability to send information to the sensors, but really the person who's driving the vehicle still needs to be ready to take over. Level 4 is just kind of taking level 3 to another step. And more areas of travel. One thing that might be very interesting here is truck freight, and this is where we start thinking about, say, sending autonomous trucks on parts of the expressway that are very rural overnight to move goods from far outside of the region to a much closer in area. That's a time where it's hard to get drivers, it's hard to get them for that short shift and overnight, so you can start to see some interventions there. And then finally, 5 is full automation. Let's talk about what happens at each of these levels and what some of the benefits are. One of the biggest things about autonomous vehicles that we see as a benefit is safety. We're all good drivers, but really none of us are that good of drivers. So you have a lot of benefits in terms of accidents, reducing accidents that we see. Congestion. Depending on how the land use comes out, congestion could be reduced or increased. But you start to see those changes starting around level 4. Again, when the car is completely taking over, you have vehicles that are communicating with each other on the road, maintaining distance between vehicles. And then level 5 is when we start to see land use impacts. If you can copy your car and treat it like transit, like you might take a metro train today, or you take an app, you have a lot more options on where to live. So this is where we are today. There's an asterisk here because this is in some ways, people call it the most unsafe because you think you're in a fully autonomous vehicle, you might not pay as much attention as you need to, and there's actually a higher likelihood of this is some of the accidents that we've seen, some of the accidents that we've heard about. So, are we there yet? The answer is no, but we're on our way. So, if you're not familiar with the hype cycle, I think it's really fun. They do this for a number of things. This is the emerging technology hype cycle. They take a look at where different emerging technology is in development. And they actually just last year split autonomous driving into the 2 levels we haven't achieved yet. We used to look at it singularly. So level 5 is over here, level 4 is over here. Both of them are at more than 10 years. So we're a little ways away. When you think about affordability and getting that technology not just to something that's implementable but affordable, that's another 10 years. And then when you think about really getting it into a larger portion of the fleet, that's another 10 or 15 years. So that's about where we are. And I think kind of one of the things that's going to happen, and one of the things that happens with a lot of technologies, is when it hits the point, and what I just laid out, it falls up into what they call the trough of disillusionment. So, to not get disillusioned, one of the things I'm going to talk about is some of the really cool things that we get from autonomous vehicles. And we get advanced technology to choose, look at the productivity. And just so you know, this is kind of where it's been the last few years. So, kind of slowly going through that. So, one piece of autonomous vehicles that we already have in many ways, and we can get quite a lot of benefits from, are connected vehicles. So, this basically enables a transportation system that responds to the needs that we have, and we can change the way people are moving on it dynamically. So today, if there's traffic, you pull up Google and you want to go somewhere, Google gives you a different route to get around that traffic. If we have a well-connected system instead of well-connected vehicles, we can change the way that the system is working. So you might not have to go around, and you can still take the more direct route. We're doing things to get people moving faster. A lot of this technology already exists, and there are several different kinds of connectivity. So we have vehicle-to-vehicle, that's the vehicles on the road talking to each other. That's helping them keep the appropriate space between each other. That's helping the ones half a mile behind hear that there's been a fast stop, so maybe there's an accident, things like that. Vehicle to infrastructure. This is communicating usually with the government, with the public, with the traffic management center that is using that information to change stoplights, change routing, those sorts of things. So everything is all of that, and also including media, personal communications, and other things that you might want to figure out. So, in a future that has a lot of connected vehicle technology, vehicle to infrastructure, vehicle to vehicle, there are quite a lot of things you can get. So I talked about the traffic management center. It's pulling data from individual vehicles that are communicating to it about issues like speed, sudden stops. You can even get information about weather. And it's using interconnected signals to say, change light timing on a really congested corridor where the cross streets are not congested, to really prioritize movement on that street. You can also prioritize the movement of transit. We do this already today. There are bus priority signals. We could do this more dynamically and proactively. Your car could tell you where the closest open parking spot is to your destination. If it's an electric vehicle, it might also tell you where the charging location is. And then finally, one thing I want to talk about, a big way to manage space is to price it. So we have managed lanes and dynamically price, particularly on the expressway. We can help push traffic to other times, encourage people to take transit or carpool instead. So, connected autonomous vehicles, you're going to kind of see CMAPs from here on out, and connected autonomous vehicles are going to have broad impacts on quite a lot of this. So, mobility. Increased real-time transportation data, more modes. Cellular vehicle data cellular and vehicle data will enable a lot of dynamic management of the system that I just talked about. We can also be more transparent about our investments. We have a lot more information about the system, the way that it's moving. That allows the government to provide more information about how it's making its decisions. And then finally, all of this new data and information gives us gives us data that we don't have today. So right now, we don't really know how many people are walking or where they're going. Data on biking is not very good either. And TOCs are low level. We don't know much about their movements. So bringing in all of this information can help us better manage the transportation system. So I talked a little bit earlier about how online ordering of goods is changing the way that we buy things. We're also having some competition for space. So suburban downtowns particularly, but some of our commercial corridors in the city as well, we have deliveries, ride hailing, bike share, and everything kind of competing in the same space on the curb. So that's something that we're going to have to figure out. We think connected autonomous vehicles can do a lot to ease last mile deliveries. The outcomes there will be different in very urban areas versus very rural areas. So there is, for example, potential for drones in very rural areas, much tougher in urban areas. In urban areas, you might have a connected autonomous truck bringing the bulk of the goods for a small area at an off time, and a person coming in and delivering all those by hand later. So it can help get the goods to the place at a better time. Connected vehicles, we can start to rethink the system, but that system might still look a lot like it does today. It's just maybe we're using paint to reallocate road space or to push you to different places at different times. There are large improvements to safety just with connected vehicles because the vehicles can talk to each other, and that enables some of the sensing and self-adjustment technology that I'm talking about. And there are large potential improvements to transit. So right now you get good information on CTA, but not necessarily on Metro. Metro does not have all of the connectivity or equipment installed, although they are doing that. And it can even help buses and trains arrive on time more by having them stop at the exact same place every time, by allowing pre-boarding and allowing things that just get people onto the transit nets. When you put connected and automated together, you get massive improvements to safety. People are not driving anymore. Vehicles have quite a lot of sensing technology to see what's going on, and they can communicate with each other in space properly. Congestion will depend on the land use outcomes. There's a lot of potential benefit for transit. So you might have an on-demand autonomous shuttle that gets you to your metro station, or even just takes you on a commute that a train wouldn't serve right now, so you don't have to drive. There's potential for reduced parking needs, and I'll talk more about that later, but there is potential for increased travel. So let's talk a little bit about development impacts. I think this picture is not something that people think about when they think about autonomous vehicles, but depending on which way we go, we'll continue to greatly expand our developed footprint into these areas of the region or any other region that's dealing with it. So land use outcomes really depend on what model we choose, and that's shared versus private. So shared is an expansion of what Uber and Lyft are today. Major companies like that own very large fleets of autonomous vehicles. Call a vehicle up on your phone, they arrive, you hop in it, it's not yours. Private is not that different from today, it's just that everybody has an autonomous vehicle instead of a regular car. And there are some things that happen there. So in a shared future, for rural and low density areas, you wouldn't see necessarily the character of the land use change out there. You'd have a normal pace of advancement of development. You might see more manufacturing, more industrial, and you might see more services. So you seniors have a lot more transit options because autonomous transit shuttles are more cost effective to provide. In a private future, you would see accelerated expansion of the region, development of areas that are not rural. For moderate density, you've got more choices to get around. In a shared future, you've got more choices to get around. We see increased densities and continued advancement of multimodal options. We think that on-demand shuttles that go short distances or fill gaps that the rail network can't fill right now are particularly important here. And then in a private future, you kind of see increased congestion issues and maybe small increases or decreases. These places are already built out. They're not going to change nicely. And then finally, outcomes in dense urban areas. When you talk about downtown Chicago, even some of our major suburbs, these places will continue to grow in either way if we can get to them to be very different. So dense urban and a shared future, you have very good, well-connected transit. It's fast, it's frequent, but you also have a lot of multimodal options. You can hop in a connected autonomous vehicle if you need to get somewhere fast by yourself. In a private future, we've all had to spend a good amount of money expanding the road network as well. So the transit has not been invested in quite as much. We have only so many dollars. Density might not have increased quite as much in our very urban areas, but they've still been invested in 5 to 7.
Well, I just had a question about the shared babies below.
Yeah.
I think, you know, the magic of Lyft and all the others is that when you're in an urban environment, there's a lot more choices, right? And if I'm in a rural or low density area, are you imagining that there'll be, you know, a delayed pickup, like more wait times, that kind of thing? Or
So when I talk about a shared future for these areas, it's likely that a lot of people out here will still own their own vehicle, right? Because people are again going to do what makes sense for them in terms of time and cost. And in a rural area, if you're going to have to wait 10 to 15 minutes every time for the shuttle to show up, that's not going to work for most people. So the shared future is more likely to preserve some of the current land use patterns that are there. It'll provide a lot more transit options for people who right now can't get around for various reasons. They're not old enough, they have mobility issues, they don't want to drive anymore, that sort of thing. But that's probably going to happen. Neither of these is 100%, right? And so actually, that's a good kind of segue to a simpler way of thinking about this is there are kind of two polar opposites. The reality will be somewhere in between those futures. So you might have this very multimodal future, or you might have, you know, everyone's driving their own autonomous vehicle very far every day. Once you get a fully connected autonomous vehicle network, those cars can go faster. So that will make people comfortable going longer distances, and you can, you know, relax while you're traveling. One thing that we often talk about too is the cost of all of this. If we continue to grow without really increasing densities, there is an issue with how we continue to sustain that infrastructure. This map is from onto 2050. The areas in red show where we added development from 2000 to 2015. If you add all that up, it's about equal to the size of the city of Chicago. And that's a 12% increase. In that same time period, jobs were flat. So not really a decline, not really an increase. We added about 4.5% to our population. So if you are continuing to expand without adding to the economic activity, adding to your resident base, you're expanding infrastructure without expanding your ability to pay. So impacts on equity. I think this is something that we don't necessarily think about or cover when we talk about autonomous vehicles. There are some potential benefits. There are some potential pitfalls. So right now in the region, Black residents travel on average about 6 minutes longer than most other residents to get to the job every day. It might not seem like much. That's 12 minutes a day. That's an hour a week. That's 50 hours a year. When we drill into areas of the region where this works, these gaps get bigger. So 12, 14, 15 minutes each way. So there are severe gaps in commutes by race and ethnicity in the region today, and by income. So there are some benefits that autonomous vehicles can provide here. Number one, for people with disabilities, this is going to help everyone with disabilities, but there is a large portion of the population that would benefit and have much more mobility. On-demand autonomous shuttles could fix commutes right now that people are taking on transit, and it's not really built for that. So we see residents of, say, the west side of Chicago taking a 90-minute commute to Schaumburg, a commute that's even longer to Will County. Autonomous shuttles could provide a better, faster, more direct option. We also have some issues. So low-income communities, may not be able to make the investments they need. You have to install sensor technology, you have to install additional striping and maintain it more frequently. So you have potential to kind of exacerbate cycles of disinvestment that we see. And individuals may not be able to afford these technologies, so we're going to have to put structure in place to try to make that happen where it needs to. So how can we prepare? This is a recommendation straight from ONTO 2050, which is furnace technology to improve travel. So first, invest in technology, infrastructure, and regulation. One of the things that happens a lot in transportation today, we have a lot of things to do. We install technology in pilot studies, in innovation grants. We don't get long-term funding for it. And so we're going to need to move to an idea where we're thinking that this is just part of the job, part of the cost. We're installing and replacing this on a regular basis. A lot of what needs to be done is not technology, but people. So we have many different transportation implementers that are involved in this. They'll have to coordinate across jurisdictions. If we want that well-connected transportation network where we can, get a road moving on the fly, that's usually not just one transportation implementer. So that's for all of us to come together and coordinate. We need to continue to support pilots. You see a lot of these on the road today, but across all modes. We need to establish data sharing agreements with the private sector to get information about how these vehicles are moving. But we also need to think about privacy for individuals and what all this information means for individuals. When we're collecting all this information, how can we be sure that people are not having information collected that they want collected or not individually identifiable? We're going to have to change our transportation infrastructure. So we're going to have to add striping, reflectors, sensors, and data processing technology to guide CAVs and take all this information in. We're going to have to maintain our roads more frequently. So if there are pavement signals that really help all of this move more safely, we can't have the kind of faded and missing striping that we see on roads today. And we might need to rethink our pavement. So I talked earlier about how autonomous vehicles are better drivers than we are. They go in exactly the same place in the road. That can cause some rutting. So we could change our pavement. They might also be able to program them so they weave a little bit in the road and distribute that movement. Sorry, here's some water.
I'm imagining that there'll be sensors for potholes, etc.
Yeah, so one of the great things here is you have all these vehicles that are monitoring all the time. So the vehicle will see a pothole, will send that information back to that traffic management center that I showed earlier, and we get much more real-time information about the condition of the system. We will also have to fix it more quickly, particularly if it's something that helps guide those vehicles. And so that's an issue for us.
One of the weak links in the chain I'm reading is that the individual cameras and sensors are not necessarily at a level where they can always work. In other words, really cold weather, steamy windshields, or ice rust over the camera, or even my own car will warn me when I change lanes, but in the rain it won't warn me because the reflection pools in the camera.
Yeah.
So that is an issue that sort of is the center of everything working properly. And there's got to be some way that they can figure that out. Enough cameras and
Yeah. So the hype cycle I showed earlier, that's one of the big issues, right? The hype cycle that I showed earlier, kind of moving through, the sensor technology actually isn't there yet to operate in some of the very complex situations that we talk about. One of the accidents that a Tesla had, light was shining off of the truck, the sensors got confused, the alarm went off to tell the driver to take the wheel, the driver didn't, and so sensor technology is not advanced enough yet to deal with all of those situations. One solution is to use multiple different types of sensor technology. It's quite costly. Almost no one can buy that car. So there are a lot of issues to overcome, and as we advance the technology, there's a benefit there. So how will this work in the Megaregion? What we need to change, not just in the region, but thinking across state lines. So I talked a lot about the idea that this future would need more maintenance, so more sustainable transportation funding, and that would include directing money to transit. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. We need to establish federal frameworks. The federal government is already working on this, but things like safety standards for autonomous vehicles, they have to be programmed to do what is a vehicle, right? If it no longer has a steering wheel, no longer has a driver, what do we consider to be a vehicle in this environment? Something else that has to be worked out is more of a core issue, is liability. So if an autonomous vehicle gets in an accident, is it the manufacturer? Is it the mechanic? Is the person who made the parts? Some combination. So that's something that is being worked on. We're going to need to invest in electric vehicle infrastructure. A lot of the analysis being done shows that early adoption of both autonomous vehicle and electric vehicle is going to happen in fleets. And those two things kind of see each other. So helping that happen. And then finally, pricing. So it's a great idea that we can drive somewhere in our personally owned autonomous vehicle, hop out and send the vehicle to circle around while we run our errand. That's very bad for the transportation network, and having to expand the transportation network and pay to do that. So we might price, we might give you an extra toll or fee if you're running around your car without a person in it for too long. And then finally, we want to establish pricing mechanisms that work across state lines. I mentioned a road usage charge here. It's also known as vehicle miles traveled fee. As we use less and less gasoline, and we have cars that use different levels of gasoline, that kind of is no longer a good user fee. So we're going to need to think about other options. So there are a lot of strategies as well to promote a shared connected autonomous vehicle future today. So make the best use of the transportation system that we have. The connected vehicle technology that I talked about really helps us do that. So we're rerouting people on the fly. We're moving them better without having to pay to expand and then maintain a larger system. Transit plays a critical role here. People still need to get downtown during rush hour. We need to use the most space-efficient way to get them there. An autonomous vehicle takes up the same amount of space that a car takes. So we still have that same kind of map to deal with. We still need to invest in transit. Implement pricing I talked about already, and then coordinate across jurisdictions, get all of that technology to work together. If we want to push for more shared use of connected autonomous vehicles, we also need to think about walkable communities. So building transit supportive densities, supporting pedestrian environments, and I think kind of most interestingly, rethinking to accommodate some of the trends we see today. So work from home doesn't usually mean work from home. It means work from somewhere nearby. And so rethinking the buildings that we build and the community spaces that we build to facilitate that. And again, e-commerce, which is quickly evolving from massive intermodal hubs at the edge of the region to a lot of closer in mini hubs. So this is a typical summer of today. I believe you're familiar with displays. This is actually displays. And these are some of the things that we need to do throughout the region. This is all, very best practice today, so I'm not going to belabor it too much. To kind of build walkable communities that still provide travel options, so we can have a future where we support connected autonomous vehicles, but also don't have the capacity to expand them. So enhancing transit service, community spaces, making sure that we're adding space for biking and walking, interact, and moderately increasing densities. We're not building, 100-story towers and displays, but we are talking about building 5- and 6-story buildings. So one of the most interesting things here is parking regulation and parking design. Communities can just require less parking in their code, kind of that's step one. But there is a lot that developers and others are doing to think about the parking garage, what it looks like today, what it might look like tomorrow. This is a development in Denver. They built the first floor such that it can easily be converted to commercial space. And the rest of the parking garage, which is a little behind, maybe can't see, is actually built with flat floors, higher floor heights, and thought with space for plumbing and electrical access in the future. So they built a parking garage, that can be something else. They also want to design for driverless parking facilities. So this is an illustration on the bottom. I would not pay attention to the years there. I think we're a little bit behind this. This is an older illustration. But the idea is old. You have cars stacked up. You can put a lot more cars on a floor. There's no people on these floors. You actually have a pickup zone down below because you can call your vehicle to come get to you. You could see a future where you put a number of these, say, on the edge of downtown. People get dropped off, they send their car there, and we have more space in more active areas for people. So reimagining space between buildings, that actually refers to the street, the curb, and the sidewalk. But one of the things we want to emphasize is, we might not want to think about those divisions. So we already have, some things like windows and other types of spaces where it's not clear where the lines are. An autonomous future might actually have dynamic and changing uses depending on what time of day. We want to reallocate more space to biking, walking in highly dense areas, but we also need to think about reconfiguring the curb because we do have a future where there's probably a lot of people being dropped off at the curb. So less parking, more drop-off zones, and rethinking of who is using the curb when. And so that gets to the last item, which is big space for deliveries. We can dynamically price, paint, reallocate curb space to put all of these things together to make it work better for everyone, and definitely better than it does today. So, kind of starting to wrap up, this image shows some of the best practices that we have today, but a lot of this is done with paint, looking at small improvements like bump outs, allocating space to biking on the side, space for transit, etc. We can think about things that are more proactive. This illustration does a lot on green infrastructure. Street space has been changed to a park space. We still have a kind of well-organized and ordered street to allow deliveries, people, bikes, etc. Kind of end on this autonomous future where we've designed in space for automated vehicles, but also prioritize space for transit, deliveries, biking, and walking. This is actually from NACDO. It's a really good guide if you want to take a look at it. But they also have taken a look at what pieces of the urban environment do we need to think about. Because we tend to think about people, we tend to think about cars. We really need to think about urban freight and how we deal with that, and transit as well. And I've already talked a lot about the benefits of data and connectivity and pricing the space that we have. The thing I want to end on, put it out more broadly for questions, is that we need to support equity in all of this. Some of these strategies we have today, preserving and creating housing affordability. We can also learn from the private sector. So apps that TNCs like Uber and Lyft have, they give people on-demand options to get where they need to go. The private sector can learn from that, leverage that technology, and use that to improve commutes for low-income workers and provide shorter, more on-demand transit commutes. We're going to need to invest in transportation technology infrastructure in low-income communities so they have the resources they need to attract economic development and attract investment. And in all of this, we're going to need to meaningfully engage those communities and their residents. So, future in 2050, automated vehicles will not be here quite yet, but they will be a growing part of mobility. Ideally, they're increasingly shared, although there are still plenty of private autos. Due to the choices that we've made about infrastructure investment, congestion pricing, and the way that we design our communities and our streets. They're still part of a strong multimodal system that includes transit, biking and walking, and traditional autos, and we can make sure that they're affordable and accessible. So, we wanted to open it up for questions, if anyone has any.
I was wondering why they abandoned the freight subways beneath the streets here.
Yeah.
And the whole reason they built that, they used to separate freight traffic from people traffic away. I was wondering why that system can't be, I don't know, whether it's if it can't be incorporated into the streets.
So my understanding, I'm less familiar with that, so I'm going to give you a broad understanding. What I do know is that was a mix of privately and publicly maintained. It fell into disrepair over time. Lower Wacker still does some of that. There are a lot of buildings on Wacker that have loading docks at that lower level. But now we are in a space where we have to think about, well, how do we get deliveries into downtown at a time that is not peak, so you and I are leaving around them in rush hour whenever they shouldn't be. I think that's one of the benefits of autonomous vehicles is we can move those in overnight. The other side of that is the building will have this way to take deliveries. So right now, often the truck is sitting there in the street for 45 minutes now because the driver wants to, but because the building does not have a process to move quickly. So there's quite a lot that we have to do.
It was a great presentation.
Thanks.
Really interesting stuff. I work at DHMS, an engineering company.
Yeah.
We touched on it very briefly, but existing parking that's non-service level, adapting it for future use,
Yeah.
future needs. How could we as designers better use the research that you've come up with to help sell that early on in the design phase? Because it's usually an additional cost that the development team might not want to incur at that time.
Right.
So what kind of things could we do to better suit ourselves in those conversations?
Yeah, I think particularly when you're talking about developers, one of the biggest issues is the market case, right? So sometimes they're constrained by the community that might require a certain amount of parking, and they don't want to use it, any more concrete than they have to build that garage, right? So it's going to be as minimal as possible. But they also do want something that's economically successful over the long term. When we look at parking garages in big cities, you see rates that are flat, and in some cases declining. That's because services like Uber and Lyft, the combination also with transit, what have you, people are realizing that they don't need to own a car. So giving them that market information. The other side is not necessarily for you to do, but for municipalities to change the regulations that they put in place.
Rely on policy.
Yeah.
Usually it's required.
Yeah. Yeah. But they would also say, municipalities can and have, and it's my understanding that Denver is looking at this, require that the garages be built such that they can be converted. So we talked about the extra height, space for putting electrical, what have you, using speed ramps, flat floors. There are things that we can regulate, and that will happen.
About 10 years ago, when segways were announced, they were supposed to have been an absolute game changer, and the way we all change the way we move around cities, and clearly segways are being used in other ways. They're not being accepted as a primary mode of transportation. However, the technology, and it's all has to do with community acceptance, or people's acceptance of that technology, and the fact that people didn't want to be going around with these very massive vehicles. But now the technology that's using scooters, other ways. I think the way that applies to what we're doing is that things will be planned and designed by many, many people who are doing the right thing, like you're doing, and then as they find out how people will accept that technology, it'll evolve to a way that is actually a balance between what it can do and what people want it to do. And I'm just using segways as an example.
Yeah, I think you're right. I have two additions to that. I think once we get electric bikes in the region, and that's the city's working on that expansion, we'll see another jump again because people are not going to bike and you don't have to get sweaty and where they're going. But the other thing I would emphasize is we really do have to get to redesigning the street. Right now we have space for cars, we have space for people, and we keep creating kind of very narrow spaces for bikes. And then throwing everything that's not a person on foot or a car in those narrow spaces, right? And that's just not a sustainable system. So when I talk about flexible and dynamic use of the street, expanding space for biking and walking, those modes aren't going to be possible for people who are choked into
there's got to be a way to try to balance this out and control it.
Yeah, what relationships are you building with those urban planners and engineers to address the limited street width? I mean, obviously, you know, a lot of the pictures are ideally suited for new development, and if you had, you know, space to actually have 5 lanes. But what happens in a city like this, where you have limited width?
So I will say that CDOT, Chicago Department of Transportation, is quite proactive on these issues. They've done a lot. You know, I think there are always those who are saying that they can do more. But you know, former Mayor Ron Emanuel was quite a fan of increasing biking, walking, and transit. So they have done that. And so, you know, CMAP has recently focused its efforts on suburban areas. We have a very large local technical assistance program where we invite communities to come in and apply for our assistance for various projects. And we do create bike and ped plans with them. Something that's very related is parking studies and putting parking in different places to open up space for other uses. So you know that those boots on the ground we find are very important. Actually, we kind of changes that are happening in communities, or the kind of change that we want to happen. And then something that we're actually taking this to the next step. We have created a capacity initiative, and as part of that, we're building a leadership academy on various topics that we think are very important for the plan. Where we want to do specific education on what the best practices are and what we will do. So that opens up essentially our systems and knowledge to a broader set of folks than those that just come in.
Did you see the parking issue being more of, you know, cars approach the city, drop off, and then use other modal within the city, so that those drive-in lanes are purposed for other things?
Yeah, so there's a lot of potential benefit with connected autonomous vehicles. If you are putting the parking kind of a little bit on the edges of downtown, you could do this in Chicago. Once again, we need a lot less space in the garage for those vehicles. And so the priority is not to have parking on the street, but to have drop-off zones on the street and flexible spaces on the street. People hop out. A zero occupancy vehicle is okay if it's going to one of those garages. That's what we want.
How close are you with all this data collection and research to considering that certain areas of the city be car free, which means they would have the drop off outside and they would be charging like large SUVs or putting a surcharge on trucks delivering goods during peak positions. So that's what other, like London is doing that, Paris is doing that.
Yeah, so you're talking about like a cordon pricing or zonal. That's something that CMAP we recommend as a best practice. But because of the role we play as a regional planning entity, we tend not to tell people where they should do that. We would be willing to help communities that want to do that. I know that's being contemplated in some places in the city of Chicago to go car free on certain streets. But we don't designate where.
And particularly for our city, I mean, like we have 2 vortexes of Union Station and Oglomedian. It's such a huge mass, and I'm just wondering if there's a study to start to put these around other areas so that there are networks of them.
Do you mean the connected autonomous vehicles?
The multimodal exchange. I mean, we have 2 train stations downtown. Okay.
Yeah.
And 1 bus station. We have 2 bus stations.
So there is a project that's in the ANONS 2050. It's not on the short list because of its cost and how far away it is from planning. But it's the West Loop Transportation Center, and it's essentially an extension of the green and blue lines, and a diversion of them that would run under the Ogilvy and Union stations and provide a much stronger connection to CTA service than we have today. And today it's one of the most futuristic projects that exists in the plan because of its costs, because of the engineering and design issues. But that kind of very strong rail transit connection that brings the Metro and CTA systems together and gives people an option that's not a the surface street option
Mhm.
is really what's required to solve that issue.
And then how about high-speed trains, which Japan has had since World War II?
Yeah.
Here we are, this is 1919,
Yeah.
or 2019.
So that is, again, that's something that the plan recommends. That's a little out of my area of expertise, but we recommend funding for that. We recommend installation of some systems that will support that. So positive train control, which is required of the federal government, we recommend directing, at the federal level, we recommend directing funding towards, because part of that's putting in a lot of the sensors and systems that you need to just better manage the system that you have. Allow those fast trains to run on tracks that might also other times
Be
could be commuter trains and other uses. But the kind of larger Megaregion issue of a really fast train from Chicago to Detroit, that would be great. It's a little outside of our purview.
I got a few questions for you. One is, with that much level of connectivity, are there any studies out there that show that just people travel less? Because they get to that level, maybe they don't need to travel into the city to actually do work anymore.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're keeping a close eye on is work from home. It's something that is supposedly going to be, for the past 30 years it was going to happen, and now the technology, the connectivity, the ability to communicate, and all this supportive software and services have finally gotten there that's now become a viable option. And we're actually seeing that most in parts of the region where congestion is worst. So Lake County has some pretty high congestion problems. It has the highest work from home percentage. So that's a potential outcome. We haven't been able to do modeling on that, but it's a valid question.
Okay. The second question I had was what does it look? I'm an educator.
Yeah.
What does it look like for kids of the future to go? A big thing in high school is to get to the DMV and get your driver's license. What does that future look like for those individuals? And then what do you see in terms of education, focusing on urban planning or the auto industry moving forward? What are some key things you would highly recommend students learning for the future?
Yeah, so I would say that in this future, you don't necessarily need a driver's license, right? That's one of the biggest benefits. So if a parent could make sure that the kid gets in a connected autonomous vehicle to get from school to their soccer game on time, they could monitor it the whole way if they're unsure about it and would know where the child is. So we can have situations where people who are very young or are in a vehicle by themselves under modern situations. No one would need a license. So I got my license on my 16th birthday. I was quite ready to do that, and that's something societally that would shift. That's already been shifting, partly due to laws, and partly just due to differences in the way that we approach high school now. And so your other question was, what should people be learning, right?
Yeah.
This is not related to this, but data literacy in the field is, I think, increasingly important, and so that's something that people will need to emphasize. I would also focus on the idea that no one of these options is going to be the only option that we take in the future. So focusing on ideas and opportunities to learn about all of the modes, how they interact together, and how we could create a well-connected system overall.
How is the federal government keeping up with all these trends? I mean, I drive about 40,000 miles a year on the interstate,
Yeah.
and I see the conditions of our highways every day,
Yeah.
and I just can't imagine them ever keeping up with what this is going to do for the future of our communities. How are they keeping on top of this?
So you brought up two different issues. I think one is the condition of the roads, right? And one is how are they kind of supporting some of the issues that we talked about today. So I'll try to cover both. The federal government has been pretty active in this space, so they keep every few years putting out a successive autonomous standard to try to address what is more concrete and where they can put in place regulations that promote safety, advance the field, and still allow innovation. So we're at a time where we don't want to over-regulate, and we want to allow space for things to grow. They're also funding pilots for autonomous vehicles, personal vehicles, transit vehicles, and freight. So they've been pretty proactive in making sure that we are looking at the ways that these vehicles operate in different roads, and then many different types of businesses. So, early pilots were really in kind of rural areas. If these are truly going to operate for everyone, some of the more recent pilots have put that in much more dynamic environments. Condition of the system, to be frank, and Office 2050 says this, the federal government has not sufficiently invested in the transportation infrastructure system. I think that there's a lot of reasons for that, but we also haven't increased the gas tax or changed it, and I think since 1990, 1991. And so that has impacts, right? The cost of construction has increased since then. The cost of everything we buy has increased since then. We have a flat gas tax. It's just not stretching to where it needs to stretch. So part of that is sustainable infrastructure funding, and that is a hard political lift. It just hasn't been possible at the federal level as yet. I think we also need to make a case to people of what we're going to buy with that, what they're going to get, and how it's going to improve their day-to-day needs.
In my mind, I'm envisioning the infrastructure required for this is probably going to be a public-private partnership model, where you have all these tech industries coming in and partnering together, so you're not doing it.
So the sensors are happening that way today. So we have a lot of companies that are coming in and partnering with communities, paying them to put in sensors, so they can track movement, congestion, what have you, and then sell that data to others. And that's something that's been a very large uptick in recent years. That's already happening. The actual paint on the roads, those sorts of things. P3s might be a good solution for that because you can put in quite a lot of requirements, benchmarks, to make sure that they're maintained to a certain standard. That it's going to be a little harder to do on the public side. A lot of people just offload that to a private company and it has to meet the requirements.
Yeah, so what kind of considerations CMAP is taking in for security, like cyber attacks, terrorism, even evacuations, significantly breakdown of control?
Yeah. So we recognize that as an issue that has to be addressed. The technology hasn't quite gotten there. I think right now there's a recognition that if anybody really wants to get into one of these vehicles, they can. And so we recognize that the private sector needs to provide people security not only of their data, but actually the movement of their car. That's, unfortunately, is about as far as we've gone. There are significant benefits, potential benefits in terms of emergencies. However, right now when people are evacuating, it's pretty much an immediate traffic jam. If all of the vehicles are communicating and moving together in a coordinated way, you have the ability to get a lot more people out of the area they need to get out of in a much faster, smoother fashion. Yes.
Good question. My family, we use Google Waze, and
Yeah.
so it sounds very much like what you're talking about, the sensors and figuring everything out. Have you been able to take any of that data to see if it's effective in relieving congestion, or is it just adding another layer to problems not everybody has?
So right now, one of the things I mentioned is the need for common platforms. Right now, what's happening is, I would say, a pretty costly and inefficient system, which is everyone's using different data. So some public sector entities are purchasing data from companies like Waze or others that have real-time information on movement of the system. Others have their own cameras installed and they're using software to process that information. There are a mix of things going on. So I would say right now it's not that efficient. We're all doing a better job of using that data as much as we can to understand how the system works and how it's moving. That's after the fact rather than real time. If we're really going to get to that real time coordination piece, we need to start to get to some common providers of that data, whether that's public infrastructure or private infrastructure providing it, and common platforms to process it, and then use that to reorganize things.
We have time for about one more question. So.
I think the
Just have one comment. I mean, now that we're doing medical imaging merger, like Epic, and why can't we, I mean, that's a company, that's a private company that has gone public. Why can't we have companies that are then organizing this? I mean, obviously the government probably won't take this on themselves. I can't imagine it.
So the government's spurring innovation, but yeah, private companies, I think what's happening right now is there are just so many actors being created every day in the space. And that's something that will happen over time.
It'll sort out and
Yeah.
simplify.
The government is playing a role in pilots and making sure that we are continuing to advance all this technology to meet certain things that we deem are for a public good. And that's going on, and that's the role we can play.
I just had a quick comment too, because I think it's a cultural shift too.
Yeah.
A lot of people, their cars are their identity.
Yeah.
And so I feel like this multiple kind of idea is a little bit like going to uniforms at school. So that equity really happens. So I'm interested in that.
Yeah, and that's tough. Cultural shift is very hard. I would say that we're seeing that already. There's less and less car ownership, or there's more households that only own one car, and people are starting to accept that they're going to be hopping in the back of the lift, they're going to be taking the bus, they're going to be using divvy for part of their trip. And that's something that's already slowly becoming enculturated. And as we talked about earlier, though, there are some parts of the region and country where people are probably still going to need to own their own car, because that's just what's going to be most practical. So, to wrap up, there are a couple of links here that we actually have 5 alternative futures that we talked about in ONTI 2050. So I spent a lot of time on the transportation technology future, but we looked at this for workforce, for walkable communities, and for a number of other issues. If you're interested, there are great kind of easy videos that break down these concepts. Simply, I have copies of the executive summary plan behind me if you're interested in them, and I'm happy to answer any other questions, I guess, after the fact.